What's good, fam? Welcome back to another eerie edition of Whispers in the Fog. Before we unravel today's chilling mystery, Sherlock Holmes and the Howl from Withering Moor, I want to hear from you. What brought a little light to your day, and where in the world are you tuning in from? Drop your stories in the comments. I'll be featuring some of them in the next episode. Now grab your drink, kill the lights, and lean in close. Because in Whispers in the Fog, nothing is ever quite what it seems. Chapter 1. The Howl in the Night. It was a night thick with fog, the kind that swathed London in a shroud of uncertainty, making familiar streets appear like foreign territories. The gas lamps flickered feebly, their glow swallowed by the damp mist that rolled through the cobbled alleys, creating an ambiance more befitting a ghost story than the bustling city that lay beneath. As the clock struck midnight, a howl pierced the silence, echoing through the empty streets, sending a shiver down. The spine of Mrs. Bellingham, who peeked cautiously from her window at 221B Baker Street. She hastily retreated into the safety of her moth-eaten drapes, aghast at the sound. However, it was not only her discomfort that startled. In the very chambers of that famous residence, the investigating mind of Sherlock Holmes registered the sound with acute interest. Dr. John Watson, seated in his customary armchair, was reading a book on the habits of the common badger when he glanced up. "What was that?" he asked, something akin to concern etching his features. Holmes, his hawk-like gaze fixed upon the gas-lit street, was already lost in thought. "It was no ordinary howl, my dear Watson. An animal, perhaps, but something is amiss. The timbre, pained and plaintive, suggests the voice of a man as much as a beast." Before Watson could form a rebuttal, Holmes was up, his coat thrown over his shoulders, and his deerstalker cap perched, ready for intrigue. "We must investigate. If it emanates from the area surrounding the Bellingham estate, then we may have a greater mystery on our hands than mere nocturnal wildlife." They stepped into the oppressive night, the fog thickening, wrapping around them like a malevolent cloak. The howl echoed once more through the murky streets, leading them to the Bellingham Manor, a creaky edifice that groaned under the weight of its history. Moonlight struggled to pierce the fog, casting long shadows that danced upon the crumbling walls. "Holmes? Look, there," Watson whispered, pointing at an expanse of frosty grass dotted with the footprints of a large hurried figure, leading right to the manor's entrance. In contrast, the direction of any potential escape led deeper into the dense group of trees lining the manor grounds, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the night sky. "Interesting. Note the weight of these prints, Watson. An unusually large man, or perhaps a woman. The gait denotes urgency." Holmes crouched down, tracing a chilling path in the frost. The sound did not merely come from the manor, it was summoned. Before he could rise, the door creaked open, releasing a wail of protest from its rusted hinges. A middle-aged woman stood there, her frame trembling in the moonlight. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I don't know what else to do." Her eyes were wild with fear, and her hands clutched a tattered shawl around her shoulders. "Madam Bellingham," Holmes acknowledged, his demeanor shifting to engage her. Frantic energy. "What has happened?" "It's Edward, my poor husband. He's gone missing." She gasped, her distress palpable. "Just as the clock struck 11, I heard the howl. He never returned. Our groundskeeper said he saw something near the old crypt." "The old crypt?" Watson interjected, piecing together the details. "The one said to harbor the misfortune of your family?" "Yes," her voice cracked. "They say it's cursed, and that those who have ventured inside never return. But I believed it mere superstition. Now... "Calm yourself, Mrs. Bellingham," Holmes soothed, his eyes narrowing. "Superstitions often mask a greater truth. Those who speak of a curse may know more than they reveal. Can you lead us to the crypt?" As she nodded, the trio slipped into the goose-flesh-inducing darkness beyond the manor's threshold, the fog swirling around them like a living entity. The air grew heavy with the scent of moss and decaying earth, each step a reluctance, a deep-rooted fear pulsing through the soil beneath their feet, as if warning of the unearthly secrets buried within. They arrived at the crypt, a structure that rose subtly from the ground like a forgotten part of the landscape. Its weathered stones appeared to ooze shadows into the surrounding fog, and the iron door was slightly ajar. "I've never dared to enter," Mrs. Bellingham whispered, shaking uncontrollably. Holmes stepped closer. "Courage is often measured by what we dare to behold." He peered through the gap and stilled. "Watson, observe." Turning his head from the darkness, Holmes pointed to a disturbance in the earth just outside the crypt's entrance. "Footprints. These belong to one man, yet the configuration suggests someone was dragged." His eyes glinted with a ferocity that hinted at the lurking horror. But before anyone could voice their shock, the howl rang out again, even closer this time, followed by a strangled scream. They all froze, hearts pounding against their rib cages. But before they could react, a shadow detached from the darkness, running towards them. Through the fog, a figure hurtled toward them, face twisted in terror. And as he broke the line of mist, Holmes's eyes widened. Stray strands of wild hair waved like banners of desperation from the face of Edward Bellingham himself. But it was his hand that caught Holmes' attention, a distinct dark stain blossoming from a severe gash, dripping meretriciously into the night. "Help! Help me!" Edward choked, collapsing to the ground, the secret of the crypt spilling onto the cool grass, unbidden. "Holmes, what can we do?" Watson exclaimed, stepping towards the fallen man. But Holmes remained impassive, taking in every detail. "A moment, Watson," he said, his voice low and heavy with insight. "For this is only the beginning." Just as Edward whispered out a chilling warning, "Don't go inside," the shadows from the crypt began to writhe, hinting at a truth darker than anyone had anticipated. "Well then, Watson," Holmes said grimly, "our case begins in the darkness." The fog pulled closer, a suffocating embrace, as the true nature of the mystery loomed ominously, beckoning them toward Chapter 2. Chapter 2, A Letter from the Grave. A shrill gasp pierced the fog-laden air as Edward Bellingham lay crumpled on the damp grass, blood oozing from his wound into the earth. Sherlock Holmes knelt beside him, his keen eyes absorbing every detail of the unfortunate man's state. "Edward," he urged, his tone firm yet gentle, "what happened in the crypt?" Edward's breaths were ragged, words clawing their way out in fractured sentences. "I don't go inside. It was waiting for me. I saw the letter." With those fragmented words, his gaze drifted beyond Holmes, the terror etching deeper into his pallid face. A guttural sound broke the stillness, a low growl emanating from the crypt. Holmes shared a quick glance with Watson, their minds racing in tandem. The howl from earlier now resonated as not only dread, but an ominous warning. "A letter," Holmes pressed, his curiosity piqued despite the surrounding chaos. "There's a secret in the grave." Edward's eyes flickered, swimming in a haze of fear and pain. Just then, the ground vibrated beneath them, a low thrum that seemed to pulse like the heartbeat of something deeply buried. "Watson, we must bandage his wound before we investigate further," Holmes instructed, pulling his companion close. As Watson began to tear Edward's shirt for makeshift bandaging, Holmes scanned the surrounding fog, sensing that they were not alone. "Please," Edward gasped, fingers trembling as he reached for Holmes, gripped tightly by sheer panic. "The old woman, she knew. She cursed us. My family. The Bellinghams." His voice fell silent, weighed down by dread. Holmes's piercing gaze, now tracing Edward's face, reflected concern, but also unyielding resolve. "You must tell me precisely what transpired. It may hold the key to saving you." But the shadow of death seemed to loom over Edward, his pallor growing ghostly. Suddenly, his expression shifted to one of realization, a clarity slicing through the fog of pain. "The letter, Holmes." "Find it. It was hidden within the family mausoleum." "The mausoleum?" Watson exclaimed. "Where is it?" "Not far. Near the old oak," Edward managed, his voice wavering. Then his eyes glazed over, lips parting, breath shallow, his body crumpled as if snuffed out by an unseen hand. Edward Bellingham lay, still, a hushed witness to the chilling secrets he had tried to convey. "Edward!" Watson shouted, shaking him gently. But it was too late. The finality of the moment hung heavy in the air, thick with unsaid words and lingering fog. "Gentlemen," Holmes said abruptly, jolting Watson back to the present, "we must retrieve whatever this letter is before others are consumed by whatever curse looms over this family." They swiftly gathered themselves and made their way toward the old oak tree, its branches casting ghastly shadows in the moonlight. The encroaching fog seemed to conspire, wrapping itself around their legs as they navigated the grounds, drawing nearer to the mausoleum, a degradation of stone, its entrance shrouded in ivy, like the gnarled fingers of time, reaching for the unremembered dead. Holmes halted at the dilapidated structure, examining the entrance's crumbling stones with a critical eye. "Cursed, they say, but I remain unconvinced of any supernatural workings thus far. Disguised truths are often woven by the hands of men, not spirits." With a firm push, the mausoleum door creaked open, revealing the blackness within. Emitting an uneasy breath, they stepped inside. The air was cool and musty, cloaked in a scent of earth and decay. Shadows flickered along the stone walls, creating illusions that danced at the corners of their vision. "Look there," Watson said, directing his flashlight toward the back wall. He spotted a shimmering object half buried in the dust, a Nayur silver locket. This could belong to Madame Bellingham. Holmes approached, his brow furrowed as he examined its engraved surface. He flipped it open, revealing a delicate portrait of a young woman, quite likely a long-lost member of the Bellingham clan. Indeed, it must be hers. How it came to be here is a question worth pondering. But before Watson could reply, a sudden noise outside shattered the silence, a shuffling sound followed by rasping breaths. Holmes's instinct kicked in. He hurriedly shut the locket and tucked it into his coat pocket. "We must move quickly, Watson. We're not alone." As they exited the mausoleum, a silhouette formed against the dense fog, a figure hunched low. "Who goes there?" Holmes called, his voice steady despite the pulse of danger racing through him. The figure hesitated before stepping forward, revealing herself as Madame Bellingham, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You shouldn't have come here," she pleaded, a tremor in her voice. "You've awakened it, haven't you?" "Awakened what?" Holmes countered, tightening his jaw, his analytical mind piecing together the puzzle. "Madam, your husband mentioned a letter, one embedded in the family's history, seemingly tied to this cataclysm. What do you know?" Her hands trembled at her sides. I thought it was lost, buried with my ancestors. But Edward's father, a man tormented by his thoughts, had said things, terrible things. We couldn't afford to dig up the past. If the letter was found..." "What was in it?" Watson pressed, the urgency of the moment driving him closer to her. Tears cascaded down her cheeks, fear eclipsing reason. "It spoke of betrayal, of the family's wrongdoings. It cursed anyone who sought the truth within this crypt." Driven by instinct, Holmes took a step back, assessing her with a newfound perspective. In her fear lay a deeper motive, a potential concealment of darker truths. "Your fear is palpable, Madame Bellingham, but there is deeper treachery at play than mere curses." Just as she opened her mouth to respond, a chilling howl echoed once again across the grounds, engulfing their conversation in a wave of dread. Shadows stirred in the mist, its creeping fingers beckoning towards further depths. "Come on, Watson," Holmes demanded, the determination igniting once more. "There's more to this, and we have yet to uncover the letter Edward spoke of." As they plunged back into the fog, a convergence of dark forces seemed to take shape, an ominous tapestry woven before them in threads of violation and despair. What lay in wait behind the veils of secrecy? They were merely at the outset of a grotesque maze, and yet the letter whispered promises of revelation that ignited a frenzied curiosity. As the howl resonated again, louder and more primal, Holmes sensed they were already racing against time to unearth truths hidden in shadows, yet unseen, leaving them teetering on the precipice of danger. A grave reckoning awaited, poised for their next move. Deep within, the question lingered. What would they find waiting for them in the dark? The mystery deepened, leading them toward Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Uninvited Guest. The fog enveloped the Bellingham estate, wrapping the grounds in an ethereal embrace, thick and suffocating. As Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson retraced their steps, a dreadful howl reverberated through the damp air, prickling their skin with electric tension. The echoes of Edward Bellingham's dying warning, "Don't go," inside and clung to them like a shroud, looming and foreboding. "Holmes, we must hurry," Watson implored, the fading light amplifying the dread that gnawed at him. "If we do not find that letter, the curse may claim further victims." Holmes' keen gaze pierced through the swirling fog, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. The curse, as Madame Bellingham alluded, is but an illustration of deeper terrors hidden within her lineage. The letter is the fulcrum upon which the truth rests. Each Bellingham, buried with it, hopes to silence the past, which is why they will do anything to keep it concealed, Watson replied, feeling a sense of urgency rising. The silence that followed was thick with unsaid truths, amplifying their heartbeats as they approached the very crypt Edward had warned against. Watson's eyes scanned the grounds, feeling the weight of invisible eyes upon them. "Holmes, do you not find it odd that Madame Bellingham appeared just as we were about to uncover the truth? She seemed almost prepared." Holmes nodded, his brow furrowing in thought. "The woman's desperation may well mask a culpability, Watson. She may be more entangled in her family's curse than she wishes to reveal." As if summoned from the depths of their conversation, the crypt door creaked open, serving as an invitation to the dark secrets stored within. It loomed before them, foreboding yet tantalizing. "Let us not linger," Holmes urged, leading the way into the musty darkness. They proceeded, cautiously, the shadows cast by their flickering lanterns dancing upon the stones like spirits yearning to escape. "Here at last," Holmes murmured, pausing at a weathered stone shaft adorned with frayed carvings that hinted of age-old histories. "Watch for any disturbances," he cautioned, kneeling beside a fresh pile of disturbed earth, where the darkness seemed to beckon, harboring secrets long hidden beneath its surface. Before Watson could respond, Holmes's breath hitched. "What is this?" He swept away the loose soil, revealing an oblong object, a rusted key, its surface slick with moisture, with creases etched into its form that suggested ages of use. "A key?" Watson echoed, curiosity piqued. "What could it unlock?" With a pointed look, Holmes pocketed the key. "We shall soon find out. It might serve as a tangible link between the letter, the crypt, and the mysteries laid bare." He rose, glancing once more at the shadows that seemed to whisper and curl around them. "And yet, we are not alone." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps resonated from outside the crypt, heavy against the soft earth. A figure emerged from the fog, tall, draped in a dark coat, their face obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Holmes!" Watson hissed, raising the lantern to illuminate the intruder's features. But the man shifted with astonishing speed, flitting into the fog, leaving only an echo of his footfalls. "Stay here," Holmes commanded, moving to follow. But Watson caught his arm, his instincts flaring. "This is madness. Who knows what lies shrouded in that mist? It could be an ambush, which makes it all the more imperative that we ascertain his identity," Holmes replied, breaking free from Watson's grasp and stepping into the cold grip of the fog. The London streets murmured with secrets, each twisting shadow blurring the line between friend and foe. The twisting paths guided Holmes through the intricate web of the estate, his senses heightened as they penetrated deeper into the obscurity. Watson followed reluctantly, torn between loyalty and fear. Suddenly, from behind him, a sharp gasp pierced the night. Watson spun around to find Madame Bellingham standing at the crypt's entrance, her eyes wide with panic. "You mustn't pursue him! He carries darkness with him!" "Madame, who is he?" Holmes demanded, his curiosity aflame. "And why should we heed your warning?" She trembled, the fog curling around her in a desperate embrace. He is a specter of our family's past. The Bellinghams have enemies who would go to any length to protect their lineage from exposure. If he discovers you are searching for the letter—" "What letter?" Watson pressed, frustration mounting. "What truths are you hiding?" Madame Bellingham appeared torn, her eyes shimmering with the weight of regret. He is a man driven by revenge. My husband must be saved, but finding the letter will only awaken what should remain buried. Just then, a harsh rustling sound cascaded through the fog, followed by the undeniable click of the mausoleum door slamming shut. The finality struck like a thunderclap, punishing the air with charged tension. Holmes' mind raced as he turned back to the crypt, heart pounding against the uncertainty of their next course. We must work swiftly, he said. That man shall not silence the truth. As they moved back toward the crypt, Watson's pulse raced with adrenaline. Holmes, if he knows we pursue the letter, what if he has already intercepted it? The fog thickened, suffocating their path as Holmes searched the stones of the mausoleum's entrance. Then we must uncover the key to this family's shadows first. Time is of the essence. In a haze of urgency, Holmes removed the rusted key from his pocket, turning it over in his hand as if it might whisper the secrets it was destined to unlock. Yet as he raised his gaze, a flourish of movement caught his eye. The figure from the mist reappeared, darkened features evident and determined. Holmes! Watson shouted as the shadow lunged for them, face twisted with malice. But within that breathless moment, Holmes caught a glimmer of something in the man's hand, a slip of parchment, fluttering like a raven's wing in the gloom, unmistakably depicting the very letters they sought. The letter! Holmes thundered, realization flooding him as the figure withdrew into the fog, leaving them with only the specter of retreat. Holmes! Watson gasped, fear etching his features. What will we do? Holmes gripped, the key, determination igniting a fire within his eyes. We will uncover the truth before it eludes us again. For now, the chase has only just begun. As they plunged back into the swirling gray, a storm of secrets loomed on the horizon, waiting to be unearthed. What mysteries lay entangled in the web of the Bellingham legacy? Who would be the next to pay the price for redemption? The hour approached, and with it, the lingering dread of the uninvited guest. Chapter 4. Shadows and Secrets. A bitter chill wrapped around Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson as they plunged deeper into the oppressive fog that blanketed the Bellingham estate. The shadows flickered like restless spirits among the trees, and the soft patter of rain began to fall, creating an eerie rhythm against the cobbled path beneath their feet. Holmes's grip tightened around the rusted key, its jagged edges pressing against his palm like an omen of dark truths yet to be unearthed. The haunting howl from moments ago echoed, dangerously in his memory, a reminder that they were perilously close to awakening long-buried secrets. Holmes, do you not think we should pursue that figure from the graveyard? Watson urged, eyes scanning the encroaching darkness. He holds the key to this mysterious letter we seek. Patience, my dear Watson, Holmes replied, his keen eyes penetrating the gloom. We must first assess what we have in hand. A key, a crypt, and of course, Madame Bellingham, who seems entangled in this convoluted narrative. As they approached the crypt once more, the heaviness of the air weighed on them, thick as wool. Holmes spotted faint tracks in the muddied earth leading away from the mausoleum. Look here, he murmured, kneeling to inspect the ground closely. Someone has traversed here quite recently. The landscape frowns at intruders. Watson peered closer, noting how the tracks veered toward the northern edge of the estate, a direction that led to the very heart of Bellingham's ancient history, the family manor. I suspect the man we saw is shielding vital secrets, and we may benefit from a calculated approach to secure whatever he wishes to hide. Shall we proceed to the manor? Holmes nodded, rising to his feet, his visage unreadable. Yes, but with utmost caution. Secrets have a way of ensnaring the unprepared. They moved toward the manor, its silhouette looming like a guardian of the past, twisted trees flanking the approach. Upon arriving, Watson hung back as Holmes stepped closer to the imposing front door. It creaked open, its hinges protesting a disruption of stillness that had lingered far too long. As the door swung inward, a musty scent wafted out, thick with the dust of years gone by. The interior was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the floor like specters yearning for release. Scan for signs of recent disturbance, Watson, Holmes instructed, his voice dipping low as silence enveloped them. Watson took an opposing path, his flashlight trailing. Along the rich mahogany furniture, patterns of age and neglect mingling richly with the scents of old parchment and memories tucked away. Holmes's search led him to a narrow corridor lined with portraits of the Bellingham ancestors, their gazes reproachful. Each face appears to echo the stories untold, he mused. His fingers brushed against the cold wood of one particularly ornate frame, and something shifted beneath it. A note was taped, concealed as if destined to remain hidden. "Holmes, I believe I've found something," Watson called, beckoning to his partner. When Holmes reached him, he extended the note, crumpled and yellow with age. The delicate scrawl was unmistakable, the hurried handwriting betraying a hasty author. "Beware the depths of the saga that binds us. What was buried must remain so." Holmes scrutinized the note, his brow furrowing with calculation. What was buried indeed has a contractual grip upon this family. Betrayal lurks behind every line. He slid the note into his pocket, pondering its implications. "Can it be connected to Madame Bellingham's warnings?" Watson suggested, anxiety creeping into his tone. "Surely if there exists an elusive figure lurking to disrupt our search, it cannot be mere coincidence?" "Precisely," Holmes replied, his mind racing ahead like a locomotive. "Madame Bellingham has much to lose, and by insisting we do not pursue the truths lying within this crypt, she has effectively trapped us in a web of her familial secrets." Suddenly, a distinct sound reverberated through the hallway. It was a thud, accompanied by muffled voices drifting from an adjoining room, a cacophony of low murmurs, followed by a sharp cry. "Listen," Watson urged, stepping lightly as they moved toward the door where the sounds emanated. Together they drew near, straining to hear what lay beyond. The voices became more discernible, underscored by a pleading tone. "You must understand, there are forces at work beyond our control. The letter could destroy us," a deep voice warned. "Then we must act before it is too late." Another reply, fueled by desperation. Holmes exchanged a look with Watson, the urgency palpable. "We cannot afford to let this opportunity escape," he said tightly. They pushed through the door, stepping into a dimly lit study. In this intimate chamber stood none other than Madame Bellingham, flanked by a tall figure, a man who bore a striking resemblance to Edward. Panic crystallized in her eyes as she turned to them, alarmed. "Holmes! Watson! You've interrupted." "Perhaps too late for cordialities, madame," Holmes interjected, his expression cold as steel. "Pray tell, who is this?" The man turned, his demeanor betraying a blend of defiance and dread. "I am George Bellingham, Edward's elder brother. Do not attempt to brush over the matter. Whatever you think the letter reveals, only the cursed truths which haunt your lineage," Holmes interrupted, sharp as a blade. "You both clearly have much to discuss, and I have no intention of leaving until I uncover the full depth of this familial malady." Suddenly the air shifted, suffocating the room in dread as thudding footsteps echoed throughout the mansion, footsteps drawing near. "We are not alone," Watson exclaimed, a sharp instinct kicking in. "Mere shades of the past, Watson," George snorted, but the tension in his ally's stance belied his words. Incredibly, the door rattled behind them, a sign of movements beckoning from the oppressive shadows that had now firmly engulfed the manor. As Holmes stood there, contemplating their next step, the door swung open forcefully, revealing a figure draped in dark attire, his face obscured beneath that same wide-brimmed hat. "You've meddled too much in what does not concern you," the intruder seethed, clutching a glinting object in his hand. With the weight of tension thickening the air, Holmes's eyes darted between George, Madame Bellingham, and the uninvited figure. "It appears the shadows we so fear are more intertwined than we imagine." This enigmatic closure to a spiraling descent into darkness pressed against Holmes's resolve. In that moment, all secrets shimmered in the dim light of revelation, leaving him wondering not just what the man intended to do, but also who among them would emerge unscathed in the face of desperate truths. The treacherous tapestry of the Bellingham legacy lay poised for further unraveling, and the shadows whispered loudly in the stillness. Wealth of secrets awaited beneath layers yet unseen. Chapter 5. The Curse of the Moor. A windswept chill hung heavily over the Bellingham estate as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood transfixed in the dim study, the echoes of the earthquake-like footsteps outside reverberating against their very souls. The figure that had invaded their sanctuary, a man cloaked in shadow and menace, stood framed in the open doorway, a glinting dagger raised ominously in his hand. "You've meddled too, much in what does not concern you," the intruder growled, his voice like gravel, sending a shiver down Watson's spine. George Bellingham recoiled slightly, his face paling in the presence of the developing threat. Madame Bellingham turned a shade whiter, the weight of her family's dark legacy crashing upon her like an avalanche of regret. "Your brother, Edward, built a life around these secrets," Holmes retorted, his keen mind racing, processing the threat before him. "But you seem eager to perpetuate the cycle of concealment." "Holmes, watch out!" Watson shouted as he surged forward, instinct guiding him. The intruder's eyes flickered with malevolence, and in that split second, he lunged at Holmes. The detective pivoted, bringing a hand up to deflect the advancing wrist, and the dagger crashed uselessly into the doorframe. The sharp crack filled the room, like a jolt of electricity igniting a dormant storm. "Enough of this ruse," Holmes exclaimed, wrestling with the man as he struggled to regain his footing. "You appear to have abandoned the guise of subtlety. Who do you believe will remain in your corner after you reveal your hand?" With unexpected agility, the man broke free of Holmes's grip and darted into the shadows of the corridor, leaving the three standing in stunned silence. "Stay here," Holmes commanded, darting after him. But as he reached the threshold, Madame Bellingham grasped his sleeve, panic lighting her features. "Do not chase him, Holmes. He carries a curse that may well bring ruin to us all." "An empty threat, I assure you," Holmes replied, though the gravity of her words weighed heavily on his mind as he pushed forward into the fog that enveloped the manor. Each step felt heavier with dread, the soft patter of rain against the cobblestones, a haunting symphony to his thoughts. Westward, the shadows deepened, merging into the East Moor, an expanse notoriously linked to tales of curses and restless spirits, a perfect backdrop for the sins of the Bellingham lineage. "Holmes!" Watson called from behind as he hurried to catch up. "We must regroup. That man is likely biding his time," Holmes interjected, his eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of the intruder. "He knows this estate too well, and we've underestimated him." As they ventured deeper into the fog, Holmes's mind spiraled with possibilities, converging around the rusted key still clutched in his pocket. "The key," he murmured. "There is something about its origin that piques my curiosity. Was it intended to unlock more than just doors?" Their footsteps crunched against gravel as they navigated the exterior of the manor, the silhouette contorted and trembling in the spectral light of the lantern. Somewhere nearby, the call of a night owl echoed, transforming the laurels into solemn guardians of the night. "Holmes, we must address the immediate matter at hand," Watson began, but his words faltered upon witnessing Holmes's sudden stillness. "Look there," Holmes indicated, his voice lowered to a whisper, pointing towards a crumbling stone wall that bisected the grounds. A vine choked with time snaked its way around the uneven bricks, and a smudge of crimson caught his eye. "What is that?" Watson inquired, moving closer, catching the scent of iron mingling with earth. "Blood," Holmes observed, tracing a line with his finger. "Fresh, perhaps, from a recent scuffle. This may lead us to the truth." As they continued to sift through the shadows, their lantern flickered uncertainly, the glow illuminating a narrow secret pathway hidden beneath brambles. "We shall follow this trail," Holmes declared, leading the way with vigilant urgency. Cautiously, they crept along the path, which opened into a clearing where shattered remnants of an ancient well stood sentinel against the night. It loomed ominous and foreboding, but what captured their attention was a large half-buried object wedged ominously among stones, a tattered parchment, edges frayed and ink-faded with time. Holmes bent to retrieve it, holding it up against the flickering light. "This must be the letter that Madame Bellingham implored us not to pursue. Her family's burden inscribed within," he mused, reading the contents quietly. Desperation choked his voice as he deciphered the script. Beware the specter of vengeance that haunts the moor. What was solid has become lost in shadows, and curses run deep. Mechanically, Holmes scanned the area, his instincts sharpened. There's something deeper than the mere words. The moor is more than an expanse of land. It is the grave of history, the harbinger of vengeance. That man knows exactly what dangers await. Just as he turned to share his thoughts, the sounds of hurried footsteps rang out from the inky shadows ahead. Watson braced himself, his heart pounding as the air thickened with tension. Holmes! It could be him! But in the haze of confusion that followed, a figure emerged, silhouetted against the looming darkness, the last man they had expected, George Bellingham. The stakes are far higher than you realize, George pleaded, his eyes glistening with trepidation. If you don't turn back now, the realities you uncover could destroy us all. Holmes held the letter aloft, his jaw clenched. Is this the key to unlocking your family's legacy, George? Or is it your last attempt at silencing the very truths that could save you? Before George could respond, the gale swirled around them, lifting tendrils, a fog that danced like restless spirits, concealing the depths of the moor behind a thick, impenetrable veil. Watson's heart raced. Something sinister loomed in the darkness. A specter, perhaps, far beyond their current comprehension. They were racing against time, against shadows that stretched eagerly to engulf them. Holmes felt the pulse of secrets living in the air, pulsating to the rhythm of their discovery, that would soon either unravel or ensnare them. Into the depths we shall go, Holmes resolved, for we have only just begun to scrape the surface of the Bellingham curse. As the night thickened, so too did the mystery, laying the groundwork for darker disclosures yet to come. Chapter 6. A Vanishing Act. The oppressive fog clung to the streets of London like a shroud, swallowing the lantern light and transforming familiar paths into shadowy labyrinths. Sherlock Holmes adjusted his collar against the chill as he and Dr. John Watson made their way down a narrow alley strewn with cobblestones, the echoes of their footsteps swallowed by the encroaching mist. The previous night's encounter at the Bellingham estate clung to their minds, heavy with unspoken revelations and uncertainties. Watson, deep in thought, broke the silence. You believe George Bellingham holds more secrets than he has unveiled? Holmes nodded, his sharp gaze flickering through the murky air. He displays a veneer of desperation, Watson, yet I suspect beneath it lies a pivotal truth, one that he fears may surface as we probe deeper into the Bellingham legacy. Suddenly, a cacophony shattered the stillness. A scream pierced the night, echoing from a nearby residence. Without hesitation, Holmes sprang into action, leading Watson through the mist toward the source of the sound. They arrived at a modest townhouse, its windows aglow with flickering candlelight. Holmes, it seems to be coming from within, Watson whispered, his pulse quickening. Indeed. Let us proceed quietly, Holmes replied, gesturing for Watson to follow as they skirted around the side of the house, where an open window revealed a chaotic scene inside. Peering through the glass, they witnessed a woman, her dark hair disheveled, wringing her hands in despair. He's gone! He just vanished, she cried, her voice quivering with terror. The room was dimly lit, casting her shadow against the wall like a phantom. Who is she? Watson murmured, curious but wary. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he made a swift deduction. The lady must be Clara, the daughter of Madame Bellingham's late cousin. I recall her name whispered in relation to family affairs. We must ascertain the full nature of her distress. The detective stepped inside through the window, and Watson followed, cautious of the glass shards. What do you mean, vanished? Who is gone? Holmes asked directly. Clara turned, startled at their abrupt entrance, her eyes widening. Mr. Edward, he was here one moment, and then he was gone. Edward? Watson repeated, taking a step closer. What were the circumstances leading to his disappearance? Just moments ago, Clara stammered, her breath hitching. He was here, arguing with George. It was about the family letter, I think. Go on, Holmes prompted, his mind working at a furious pace. They were lost in a quarrel, and then, suddenly, Edward turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost. He stumbled toward the back door, and he just stopped. One moment I could see him, and then he simply disappeared. Before my eyes, like smoke in the wind. Her voice quivered as she gestured towards the darkened back of the house. Interesting. And George? Holmes inquired, his brow furrowing. Has he left as well? No, he's still in the drawing room, but... Clara hesitated, glancing toward the door, her face a mask of trepidation. I fear for Edward. I sense something malevolent at play. Something malevolent, Holmes echoed thoughtfully, his voice low as he approached the back door, motioning for Watson to follow. We should investigate further. As they stepped outside, the chill gripped them tighter. The backyard was overgrown, weeds clawing for space under the moonlight. Holmes's keen observation led him to examine the ground. Ah, look at the soil here, he murmured, kneeling to inspect a disturbed patch, a footprint partially obscured beneath the underbrush. Fresh, but more importantly, heading toward the alleyway? Watson joined him, squinting to see the trace. What does it signify? Someone either fled or was taken. Either scenario is equally disturbing, Holmes replied, but perhaps more vital is what we uncover ahead. They followed the trail until reaching the alley, which stretched into obscurity. Here the air held a tinged unease, laden with whispers of what lurked behind the fog. Holmes halted, deep in thought. This leads us to an inescapable conclusion, Watson. Edward's disappearance is intricately tied to George's apprehension regarding the letter. He felt threatened, perhaps even cornered, leading him to a desperate act. What lurks in this perilous web of Bellingham's secrets? Watson mused, anxiety prickling his skin. I suspect a revelation of far greater import than we currently anticipate. The two made their way back to the house, Edward's absence heavy upon them. Clara met them near the drawing room door, her expression a mixture of dread and hope. You found something? Edward vanished mere moments after arguing with George. We must confront him, now before he too slips away, Holmes declared, pushing past Clara into the drawing room. There, before the fire's dying embers, stood George Bellingham, his gaze distant. You've returned, he remarked, his tone deceptively calm. Where is Edward? Holmes inquired sharply. What transpired in the moments before his disappearance? George swallowed hard, an anxious flicker passing through his eyes. He disappeared into thin air. I could not have prevented it. Was it a trick? A distraction? Watson pressed. No. George's voice fell to a haunting whisper. He mentioned a secret passage, a way to escape. I didn't believe him until now. Holmes leaned forward, a sharp look in his eyes. A secret passage? Unfold the anxiety coursing through your family affairs, George. You may yet hold the key to finding Edward. At that moment, the sound of scuffling echoed outside, drawing their attention. Holmes exchanged a knowing glance with Watson as the air shifted. The tension. Electric, a trick of the night? Watson asked. But Holmes had already moved to the window. Through the fog, a shadow loomed, instantly recognizable as the cloaked figure. You meddle, it hissed, brandishing a glinting knife once more, eyes hungry for retribution. Holmes clenched his jaw. We are not alone, my friend, and our trials have only just begun. As the figure surged forward, cloaked in darkness, Holmes's mind raced, burdened with the weight of the night's revelations. They stood on the eerie precipice of discovery, teetering between peril and truth, as another threat sought to obscure Edward's fate, entwining them deeper into the Bellingham saga. In that moment, the flickering flame of the truth dimmed, swallowed by the gusting winds of uncertainty. The air thickened around them, shrouding their fates and setting the stage for a mysterious interlude, awaiting resolution, one that would unearth the ghosts of the past with unsettling finality. Chapter 7. The Hidden Will. The fog thickened like a tangible shroud over the streets of London, curling and twisting in the dim gaslight, muting all sounds but the faint echo of footsteps. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood at the threshold of the Bellingham residence, tension crackling in the air. Watson had barely closed the door behind them when a harrowing scream pierced the silence, reverberating from the drawing room like a cry from hell itself. "Holmes!" Watson gasped, the urgency fueling their resolve as they rushed in unison to investigate. The figure in the doorway, cloaked and menacing, lingered just beyond the firelight, pale fingers clenching a dagger that glinted with malevolence. You meddle too deeply, detectives, the figure hissed, its voice a low, furious growl, eyes gleaming with a desperate intensity. Step aside, George, Holmes barked, pushing his companion forward to draw the man's attention. We have no intention of leaving until Edward is found. George Bellingham stood behind the wire, cloaked intruder, shaking visibly, a storm of emotions swirling in his eyes. I don't even know what just happened, he stammered, bewilderment written across his features. What do you want? The intruder, having shifted the dagger's angle menacingly, took a backward step, advancing further into the shadows. You must all pay the price for uncovering the past, he spat, almost wild. Then, without warning, he lunged sideways through the open window, vanishing into the pall of fog outside, leaving only a tableau of stunned faces and unspoken fear. I fear we've stumbled into a maelstrom far darker than anticipated, Watson remarked, his voice steady as he stepped toward the window, searching the obscured landscape for any sign of the man. What the devil just happened? Holmes, ever the vigilant observer, turned his gaze to George. You've withheld information, haven't you? This man is tied to your family more intimately than you wish to admit. What shadow of guilt haunts you? No, it isn't, George protested, suddenly fierce. I wish to protect my family for what that assailant seeks. Edward understood more than he let on. Then enlighten us, Holmes demanded, intensity etched into every word. What did he know? Why was he arguing with you? About the will, George admitted, a shred of shame flickering in his expression. There exists a hidden will, one purportedly left by our father. If revealed, it could dismantle everything. Dismantle what? Watson pressed, watching as George's face wrought with conflicted emotions. Your authority, your fortune. Both, George admitted, the weight of secrets visibly smothering him. If the will is valid, it implicates me in crimes far greater than mere family betrayal. The curse of the Bellinghams runs deep, and I am only a pawn in a game I cannot control. Holmes, his mind rapidly cataloging the implications, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Tell me exactly where that will can be found. Time is of the essence, and your hesitance could cost us precious seconds. I had hidden it beneath the floorboards in the attic, George began, but the shattering sound of a brittle frame echoed through the room, diverting their attention. More distractions? Watson queried, frustration flashing in his eyes. But before he could voice concern, Clara rushed into the room, breathless and pale. They found a letter. A letter? Holmes interrupted, his heart quickening at the implied promise of revelations. From whom? Clara shivered, glancing to George for assurance. It's from Edward. I was searching the dwelling for clues about his whereabouts when I stumbled across it tucked within a book. Something about the family history. It makes references to debts and... Debts? Holmes edged closer, beckoning her to hand him the fragile page. His fingers brushed over the roughened parchment, and he caught the scent of age lingering beneath the ink. The letter unfurled, revealing a handwritten confession, teeming with dread. To my cousin George Bellingham, I found myself entangled with affairs darker than I can comprehend. There exists a crypt within the estate where the truth of our lineage awaits. If anything happens to me... The letter slipped from Holmes's grasp, crumpling against the floor. Damn, he uttered, frustration pouring forth as he crouched to retrieve it again. But as his fingers brushed over the surface, he froze, a fleeting glimmer catching the corner of his eye. Blood! What? Clara gasped, her eyes widening with horror. Not just blood. Holmes's voice lowered, caution filling the space between them. It's more than that, Clara. This letter bears a mark, a symbol, familiar. He stood abruptly, his breath quickening. The same symbol as that cursed key we received at the estate. It represents the depth of betrayal within your family. I know nothing of it, George interjected, his voice rising in panic. Only that it is a family legacy I loathe. And yet, these shadows grow thicker with every moment, Holmes replied, dark intensity cloaking his features. We must find that hidden will, for within it lies the crux of this mystery. From outside the window, the screech of a raven sliced through the thick fog and weighed heavily on their hearts, and then a single carafe shattering on the brick pavement echoed ominously through the night, pulling each of them toward the door like a moth drawn to flame. "Holmes, what do we do next?" Watson questioned, his voice steady, locking eyes with his friend. "Follow the sirens of the unsettled night," he replied with a fierce glint in his eye, "for I sense that Edward's path is unfolding near the secrets buried within that attic. If we do not reach him fast enough, he may pay the ultimate price." As Holmes rushed toward the door, an unsettling chill gripped the room, heavy with unspoken fears. The promise of revelation hung in the air, another layer of the Bellingham curse ready to unfurl, and before the darkness fully descended once more, Holmes felt a fleeting sense of dread. This time, the stakes involved far more than mere family squabbles. Before they could step into the twilight beyond, a thrumming pulsated through the walls, a sound both distant and near, an echo of the past, taunting them with the notion of what lay hidden just beyond reach. The clock was ticking, and haunting questions loomed. Would they reach Edward in time? Would they unearth the hidden will before the malevolence swept through the Bellingham bloodline like wildfire? The night held its breath, waiting for its secrets to be revealed. Chapter 8. The Eye of the Beholder. The clock struck the hour, its toll echoing through the dimly lit streets of London, where fog enfolded the gas lights in a shroud of secrecy. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson hastened through the dewy air, the latter's brow furrowed in concern, a weight of dread pressing on his chest. Their frantic pursuit had led them to an abandoned lane, the air thick with an ominous chill, punctuated by the distant cry of a raven. "Holmes, do you believe Edward's plight is tied to the hidden will?" Watson questioned, unable to suppress his anxiety as he walked briskly alongside his friend. "Indeed," Holmes replied curtly, his mind racing with possibilities. "But the thread connecting Edward to that ravenous figure in the drawing room is fraught with deception, and we are amidst a web spun from very human motivations, Watson. Greed, jealousy, and fear." Their conversation was abruptly halted as a soft rustle broke through the prevailing silence, drawing Holmes's keen attention. He stopped, bracing himself against the knotted iron rail of an ivy-laden garden gate. "Did you hear that?" he asked, scanning the dimly lit shadows. "Yes, but the streets appear deserted," Watson responded cautiously, also glancing around. With deliberate slowness, Holmes eased open the gate. It creaked ominously, and as they entered, the fog coiled around their ankles like fingers gripping them. A sudden dread filled the air as they approached the weathered front door of a neighboring house. The Bellingham estate's silhouette loomed against the night sky, transformed into an eerie apparition. As they stepped towards the threshold, the door swung open to reveal Clara, her eyes wide with fear. "You must come quickly. I found something I didn't understand until now," she exclaimed, her voice barely a whisper over the soft sigh of the wind. "Pray, what is the matter?" Holmes inquired, his tone an even blend of concern and urgency. "It's Edward's journal," she gasped, grabbing a cloth-bound ledger from the folds of her dress. "He concealed it in my room after our earlier visit. It speaks of those debts and contains passages regarding the estate. He warned of treachery, but I didn't see how dangerous the situation truly was until now." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded a page, revealing ornate handwriting. Holmes leaned in, his eyes narrowing on the words. "Read the key parts aloud, Clara," he instructed, his every sense igniting. "This entry is dated a week ago," she recited, her voice steadier now. "I sense a storm brewing within the family, a power struggle that may end in violence. I found this mark," she pointed to a sketch, "the same symbol from the key you mentioned, Holmes." "Precisely," his face lit with fervor. "The representation of betrayal and hidden lineage, a crimson thread woven through your family's history. It appears the stakes have risen alarmingly high." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from deeper within the house, the sound reverberating against the walls like the tolling of a death knell. "Did you hear that?" Watson demanded, his hand instinctively clutching his pocket watch. "Yes, it originates from the attic," Clara replied, her voice trembling anew. "I fear something terrible awaits." Holmes's resolve hardened. "We must investigate at once," he commanded, hefting the journal under his arm. They dashed towards the dark staircase in the adjoining hallway, the air growing heavier with each step. Shadows flickered ominously around them, casting playful images of fear in the flickering light. Clara led them up the creaking steps, her heart racing with each footfall, until they reached the attic door, which hung ajar. Pushing it open, a wave of chilled air brushed past them, and the moonlight filtered through the grime-coated window. The room lay scattered with old trunks and cobwebs, but the source of the noise, the disturbance, was apparent. Several floorboards had been pried up, leaving a gaping hole amidst the dust. "Holmes!" Watson exclaimed, drawing attention to an object lying suspiciously near the edge of the hole. As they approached, the glint of silver caught their eyes. It was a small locket. Holmes bent down, his keen fingers brushing over its surface. A woman's locket, he mused, flipping it open to reveal a portrait of a lovely woman with a familiar face. "This is Lydia Bellingham, George's mother." "Where did this come from?" Clara asked, wide-eyed. "It seems destined to reveal more than just familial ties," Holmes observed, turning it over in his grasp. A piece of crumpled paper slipped from within the locket, brushing against the floor like an abandoned secret. With deft movements, Holmes retrieved it, his brow furrowing as he scanned the handwritten note. "Lydia speaks of a meeting, a clandestine rendezvous in the heart of London. The impending threat she foresaw may be deeper than we can conceive." As he read, an unsettling cohesion began to coil around their situation. Had Edward possibly unearthed knowledge that existed too close to the core of George's desperation? The patter of water dripped from the attic rafters, sending shivers down Clara's spine. Suddenly, a faint scratching sound emanated from the hole in the floorboards, causing all three to stiffen. "What was that?" Watson whispered, looking warily at Holmes. "Not. All that is buried should remain undisturbed," Holmes replied softly, a knowing glint in his eye. Before they could contemplate their next move, the boards creaked once more, and with an effort of pure will, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was George, his expression twisted with panic. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped, the pallor of fear etched deep upon his face. "George!" Holmes exclaimed, standing firm. "What are you hiding? What darkness have you invoked?" "I didn't want anyone to find it. I thought—" His voice trailed off, panic eclipsing his rationality. The floorboards splintered again, and as Clara stepped closer, a book slipped from the space beneath the floor, tumbling into the light. It was labeled Secrets of the Bellinghams, the embossed title nuanced with lines of gold. Holmes's breath hitched. Their quest for truth had now taken a pivotal turn, revealing the heart of the treachery entwined in family secrets that could alter their very understanding of loyalty and betrayal. As Clara and Watson peered into George's eyes, the layers of deception peeled away like the dust on an old tome. "You have the answers we seek, George," Holmes commanded. "What do the pages beneath that dark exterior hold?" But rather than reply, George only shook his head, his turmoil transformed into hostility, the flicker of desperation making him appear like a cornered animal. "I'll not allow the truth to surface," he snarled, taking a menacing step back into the shadows. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut with a thunderous crack, cutting them off from escape. Trapped in a web of layered mysteries, the night pressed down around them. Tension carved the air with dread, echoing the sentiment that somewhere, hidden in the depths of the Bellingham estate, lay a truth powerful enough to ignite both revelation and ruin. As darkness surged from the corners, they stood united but ensnared, the tension spiking as two worlds collided. And then, the finality of uncertainty flooded into the chamber, leaving them suspended in an abyss. The hunt was more perilous than ever, teetering on the brink of catastrophe. Would they unearth the truth before it ensnared them in its deadly grasp? The hour of reckoning approached, summoning the darkness of the past into a conflict bound in blood. Chapter 9. A Confession of Guilt. An ominous silence enveloped the attic as George Bellingham's eyes darted between Holmes, Watson, and Clara, his breath quickening with palpable dread. The slammed door loomed behind them, a barrier to escape, and the air thickened, rife with secrets and unspoken fears. "Why are you all here?" he demanded, the tremor in his voice betraying the bravado of a cornered animal. "What have you come to uncover?" Holmes steeled himself, every analytic fiber in his being attuned to the unfolding drama. "We are here to unveil the truth, George, a truth you have tried in vain to conceal," he replied, his tone steady, laced with an authority that seemed to quiet the oppressive tension. "It is essential that you divulge what you know about that journal and the secrets lying beneath these very floorboards." As George's eyes flared with defiance, Clara took a tentative step forward. "What happened to Edward? You needn't fear us, George. We genuinely wish to help." The sincerity of her words didn't soften his resolve. Instead, he sneered, drawing deeper into the shadows as he wrestled with the fragments of chaos within him. "Help?" he spat, his face contorting with bitter emotion. "I don't need your help. This goes beyond betrayal. You don't understand the blood that binds." He faltered as if grappling with a heavy burden, then resumed with renewed desperation. "The truth will ruin all of us." "Perhaps," Holmes interjected, cutting through George's turmoil with precise insight, "but hiding the truth will ensnare us in an even deadlier game. Edward has uncovered something grave, something tied to the hidden will. The debts referenced in his journal, the very debts that gnaw at your family's legacy. What do they signify?" As if summoned by his words, an eerie silence descended, heightened by the faintest whisper of the wind outside. Watson's instincts sharpened. "George, if there is any shred of loyalty left in you, tell us now what Edward discovered, or the sins of your family may consume you." With a guttural growl, George turned from them entirely, the fight within him turning into something darker, paranoia. "You have no right to question me. I was only preserving what's left of our name," he retorted, nearly stepping into the gaping void where floorboards had once been. "Your actions have damned your name far more," Holmes asserted, stepping closer, unwavering, while scanning the room for any clue that might crack the familial facade. "You seek to hide behind layers of pride and guilt. But are you willing to lay down your life for secrets that could be rightfully turned to light?" A tremor passed through George as he rallied against Holmes's gaze. "You presume to know my family? You think you grasp the weight of our lineage?" "More than you could ever comprehend," Holmes replied, his eyes unwavering. "And now it appears you are veering dangerously close to an abyss." Unexpectedly, a woeful cry echoed from the shadows of the attic, a sound not wholly human, reverberating like a lament of the forsaken. "What was that?" Clara asked, her voice wavering. "It came from below," George whispered, fear etching deeper lines on his face. "Leave now. I implore you." The specter of panic painted his features, and within the ceiling's shadows, another figure trembled, a narrow silhouette framed by dust motes. Edward, bloodied and disheveled, he seemed a ghost come to warn of his chained fate. His hand grasped the attic's edge, pulling himself into view, eyes wild with agony. "Stop!" he rasped, frustration bursting forth like a geyser. "Do not trust him. You don't know." In a single, fierce motion, George lunged forward, grasping a heavy candlestick from a nearby table, a manifestation of desperation painted over his features. "You're too late, Edward. I will not have you ruin our family," Holmes interposed, taking a deliberate step towards George, voice low and commanding. "Put it down, George. Violence will gain you nothing but irrevocable loss. You shield yourself with a weapon instead of confronting your demons. Speak. You must choose the light." The tension coiled tighter, every breath laced with impending doom. As George hesitated, torn between the instinct to defend and the desperate need to confess, Clara observed curiously, "Why are you so frightened? Surely the legacy should not warrant this terror." "Because," George's voice dropped to a hushed confession, the candlestick wavering in his grip, "it is the very darkness of our legacy that terrifies me. The legacy of the Bellinghams is soaked in more than just betrayal. There are debts, blood, debts that demand compensation." "Tell us what you mean," Watson urged, nerves rising with urgency. "Where do these debts lead? Who is truly the one in need of protection?" Edward stumbled nearer, his voice nearly lost in the maelstrom of emotions. "You've no idea what awaits within that hidden will, George. Secrets buried in the pages of your father's legacy could tear us apart." The opulent silver locket lay poised on the floor, glinting beneath the dim moonlight, as if echoing a beckoning call towards revelation. And then, a muffled thud reverberated from the floor below, resonating with the forbidding sway of fate. "We need to go now," Edward's voice escalated, filled with raw urgency. "Before it's too late." The others. But before he could finish, a sound, a muffled cry pierced the thick wooden door of the attic, stopping them cold. A shriek that echoed the depths of terror reverberated through the mansion, pulling them toward the sound as if bound by invisible strings of fate. At that moment, the attic door rattled violently, and they were plunged into darkness. "Holmes!" Watson shouted, his heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. "What's happening?" In a swift motion, Holmes stepped forth, determination raging within his limbs. "We must discover the source of that noise." With a surge of resolve, they gathered close, approaching the door which had begun to creak under pressure. The darkness loomed, thick and foreboding. "Prepare yourselves," Holmes whispered, his voice steely against the encroaching shadows. "For in this cursed house, a truth awaits us that may alter the very fabric of our fates." With that final, unsettling declaration hanging in the air, the door splintered under the weight of powerful forces, unleashing a wave of chaos just as the scream echoed again, unmistakably clear through the old wooden halls, a cry that reverberated warnings of sins intertwined in a legacy steeped in blood. The final toll was ringing. They were at the precipice of revelation, and the abyss beneath them yawned wide. What lay ahead could very well unravel everything they've built, and more alarmingly, everything they feared to confront. Thus the cryptic pursuit into the darkness beckoned, the certainty of gathered shadows poised for retaliation. Chapter 10. The Game of Deception. The scream reverberated through the attic like a chilling echo from the depths of despair, freezing them in place. Clara's breath hitched as the air thickened with uncertainty. The sudden crack in the ominous silence set their hearts racing like the horse-drawn carriages scuttling through the fog-laden streets of London. A fresh wave of chaos erupted beyond the door, an urgent thud mingled with frantic whisperings. Holmes narrowed his keen eyes, scanning the gloom, instinctively calculating his next move while time slipped away, held captive within the walls of the Bellingham estate. "Holmes, what are we to do?" Clara pressed, her voice barely above a whisper, anxiety creeping into her expression. The others, "Silence, Clara. Let me think." His attention sharpened, analyzing George's frenzied state, the clenching candlestick trembling in his grip. Watson's concern flickered, the thought of what might await them beyond the doors pressing heavily on their shoulders. "Your family's secrets have grown dangerous, George," Holmes voiced, his tone both authoritative and calming, nudging the unsteady family scion toward clarity. "Let us confront your fears rather than shroud ourselves in myth and shadows." "Stand back!" George barked, his voice unsteady yet fierce. "I warned you to leave this place. You cannot begin to fathom their wrath." "But leaving may be the very invitation they seek," Holmes countered, his focus unwavering as he sidestepped George's frenzied movements. With deliberate intent, he edged toward the window cloaked in dust, drawing close to the murky glass. He strained to discern the movements outside, where shadows merged. With the night, layers of fog swirling through the street below. "What darkness haunts your lineage, George?" "He is driven by fear," Edward interjected, gripping the edge of the attic wall, bloodied but fierce. "Fear will not win this time. You have to—" "No!" George shouted, shaking his head violently as if trying to dislodge the truth he knew lurked within him. "No one must see." He brandished the candlestick, his eyes glazed with desperation. "Not all ghosts should be faced. The wraiths of my family are more real than any of you comprehend." "A fine illusion," Holmes called back with calm confidence. "But beyond that door lies more than a ghost. We are caught in a game far more treacherous." The creaking of the door drew nearer, its vibrations whispering secrets beneath the tension-filled air. The door began to shimmy under violent assaults from outside, each impact a warning echoing around the room. "What is it you fear, George?" Watson pressed, noticing how George quailed yet stood his ground. "Will you risk everything rather than allow the truth to see the light?" Perhaps you are desperate enough to protect something grander. An act of sacrifice? While George's face contorted in anguish, the air thickened with foreboding. Edward wavered nearby. They'll do anything. They cannot allow the truth to surface, lest it drown them in their own treachery. What truth? Clara urged, stepping closer. What lies at the heart of this family? It is the uncertainty that binds you, your only weapon against the past. As the door rattled with greater force, Holmes pointedly turned back to Edward, his eyes scanning for deeper meanings. And you, Edward, you've stumbled upon knowledge that lead you into peril, yet you grasp for clarity. What exactly did you discover? Perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions, Edward returned, his face tight with tension. It's not just the past that reveals danger, but the present. Look at George. His defiance hides a fatal secret. George's focus drifted momentarily, rocketing between the hidden truths and the impending consequences, gripping him like a vice. Silence, he hissed again, every syllable punctuated with the burden of emotion held back. I'd keep all the world from knowing, even if it means losing everything. Before anyone could respond, the door splintered wide, unleashing a cold gust filled with dimly lit fear. It revealed the spectral shadow of a cloaked figure, their presence suffocating beneath the weight of dread. Clara gasped, her heart hammering. What? Enough games, the shadowy figure demanded, stepping into the chamber. The truth is no longer yours to guard, George. Holmes's analytical gaze shifted towards the apparition, his mind turning with rapid deductions. Something about the figure's presence felt familiar, not just a ghost of their past, but a symbol of the very betrayal they had sought to uncover. There lies familiarity in your demeanor, yet secrets still obscure. Your motives, he challenged. A game of deception we are mired in. The figure paused, tension reflecting in their taut silhouette against the attic's shadows. I am here for my due. The legacy that your family has sought to devour is intricately tied with the debts settled in blood, George. Were you the one? Edward whispered, horror mingling with dawning realization as comprehension bloomed anew. You have played us like pawns in a wretched game. With a sharp intake of breath, Holmes stepped forward. What claim do you bring to this family? What truths have shielded you? Enough of the theatrics, the figure snapped. The game is far larger than you perceive. Uncovering one seed of truth may yield blades sharper than any weapon you wield. Before they could respond, another muffled scream shot through the house, fiery glimpses of betrayal spiraling the air thick. Edward's eyes glazed, the weight of destiny crashing upon them. Is this man the key to unraveling our fates? Holmes interjected, we must put an end to these games, for every moment delays could bring further devastation. The shadows pooled and erased the walls from view, trapping them within the vortex of chaos. The truth must be unbound, he commanded, hurtling back toward George. But as panic set in, the cloaked figure lunged forward, revealing enchanted talismans of old entwined in their grasp. Time is your enemy, and trust is a luxury not all can afford, they intoned, as the room's tension swelled to a precipice. For in the world of shadows and secrets, each revelation carried the weight of deception, awaiting its unfolding. In that singular illuminated moment, a glimmer from the talisman caught Holmes's eye. A familial crest engraved with a familiar insignia. By all that is just, he muttered, disbelief setting in as the cloak fell away. The figure stood revealed, their identity casting a horrifying pall over the room. A puzzle piece thought long lost, entwined with obligation and buried threads of intertwining destinies. The chase had turned, as darkness loomed larger than ever before. With a desperate gasp, Holmes grasped for the edge of his understanding, a recognition that promised to unravel everything. We move now beneath the shadows of legacy, seeking truths intertwining with our very souls. But the resurgence of fear hung heavy still, as secrets and revelations danced just beyond the fringe of their grasp. In that final heartbeat, the air stilled as clarity. Before chaos, the game of deception had but begun, a vortex drawing them into its treacherous depths, every whisper revealing twisted paths of blood, and they stood at the crossroads of destiny, awaiting the next plunge into the darkest recesses of the Bellingham family's fractured legacy. Chapter 11. The unraveling. As the cloaked figure stepped closer, confusion and dread hung thick in the attic air. The revelation froze everyone in place. The noise of the once battering door now dull beneath the weight of their shared horror. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and beside her, Edward's bloodied visage contorted into one of despair. "It can't be you," he whispered, an unbelievable realization sweeping over him. "It can't possibly be you." "Yet it is," the figure responded, voice dripping with a mix of authority and bitterness. The shadows around him seemed to cling, amplifying both his presence and the unease it cultivated. "You've tread upon my domain long enough, secrets suffocating. Beneath the very roots of the Bellingham legacy, all shall be revealed." "Reveal! It is not you who has the right." George's candlestick quivered as he pointed it defiantly at the figure, a last defense against his own crumbling world. "You had a choice." "Silence," echoed the figure, and with that command a palpable force silenced George. "You were too consumed with devouring your own treachery that you failed to see the web you've woven. You think I have no claim? I am bound to this house, more intricately than you grasp, and I will sever what needs to be severed." Holmes, observing every twitch and nuance, felt the remnants of the puzzle throwing discordant pieces into motion. "This family seeks to bury their sins, yet every generation casts a shadow more dreadful than the last," he murmured, a steely calm woven through his analysis. "What debts linger in the folds of your lineage, George? You speak of sacrifice. Am I to assume it leads to blood? Whose blood?" Edward, trembling, stepped forward as Holmes's voice became the light-piercing dark confessions. "You must tell us, George. The truth weighs too heavily on your soul. You are fractured between the past and the burden of revelation. If you all wish to die, so be it," George hissed, and even he seemed to recognize the futility in his defiance. "I will not have your ignorance bear down on me. There are forces at play that you cannot begin to understand." "Then enlighten us, man," Watson urged, a confusing mix of sympathy and determination in his tone. "Your secrets are no longer yours alone. The safety of all is at stake." With a deep breath steeped in resignation, George's hand lowered, the candlestick clattering to the attic floor. "There exists a will beyond my father's, one hidden where no man would dare seek it, intertwined with the lives of those whom we regard as enemies. You must know that ties woven with treachery bind us with anger through generations." Eager for clarity, Holmes pushed, "Where is this will, George? What circumstances lie intertwined with your family enough to hint at blood debts forged in ash and sorrow?" "It rests in the walls of the hidden chapel, offered only to those who deserve to walk in loyalty," George replied, his voice quaking under the burden of both truth and terror. "But I fear you will find more than just a will. The sins that bind me bind others. It is a ledger of our lives, unraveling one thread at a time, and our past demands its own compensation. Bloody toll." Outside the attic, the wind howled against the windows, urging the group deeper into the heart of the family's hidden horrors. Holmes's instincts flared. He felt the chase propel him forward. "Then let us seek this chapel," he declared, his voice carrying an intensity that propelled them from dark conversation to action. Before they could push towards the attic door, another chilling cry echoed from within the mansion, driving its sharp nails into their resolve. "We must hurry," Edward shouted, urgency spilling into every corner of his words. "I fear for my family, and not just the Bellinghams." "Your family? Are we not all ensnared in this twisted tapestry?" Clara interjected, confusion written across her face as George shivered, the shadows of what must follow evident in his gaze. "Stay close," Holmes cautioned, eyes sharp and alert as he stepped toward the door. "But beware. Discovery of truth draws ire as much as it beckons courage. There are those who would wish us harmed should we tread too close to the lost hall of darkness." With heavy hearts and trust as their sole ally, they formed a reluctant procession toward the staircase leading into the bowels of the mansion, every creak underfoot reverberating with the weight of generations past. As they made their descent through the low-lit corridor, a chilling shift filled the air, like the space itself twisted with malevolent energy. "Who else is connected to this will?" Holmes asked, caution threading through his rhetoric. What figure orchestrates the playing board of your pain? George's face darkened. You are blind, Holmes. There is one who has shielded secrets, one who guards not just the legacy but the fortune tied to the shackles of lost souls. Reveal their name, Holmes demanded, moving through the corridor with acute determination. Lady Eleanor, George began, but a thud cut him off, shaking the very foundation of the house before erupting like thunder. And within the echoes, they heard the soft sound of footsteps ahead. Holmes pressed on, a predatory glint now igniting within his eyes. We pursue this figure now. She may hold the very key to unearthing these deceptive webs, but we tread with caution. Lady Eleanor? Edward murmured, a name filled with dread. She holds a twisted connection with the dark legacy of our families. Suddenly, a chilling howl broke the air, rippling before them with an urgency that churned the blood in their veins. The source seemed to beckon them deeper into darkness, a stark contrast to the flicker of light they sought. In an instant, the world around them flipped into chaos. A premonitory rush swept through the air, as without warning, a shadowy figure stumbled forth to block their path. You must turn back, the figure shrieked, their voice a frantic wail charged with agony. The truth shall unravel all. With a heart racing in sync with the tension, Holmes stepped forward, eyes piercing yet resolute. No, we will confront whatever monstrosity lies before us. We shall not yield nor turn back until we carve the truth from the shadows. The figure shrank away, mere steps preventing the truth from spilling into the light, icy fingers of dread daring to ensnare them. And as they strained to push on, the walls pulsated with impending doom. Upon that chilling cliffhanger, the urgency compounded as they stood at the convergence of fate's designs. A grotesque spectacle of darkness loomed ahead, ushering the shadows into focus, while the exposure of their legacy held the specter of ruin, ready to unveil itself with a flourish. And so they advanced deeper into the silence, every heartbeat heralding an awakening of destinies intertwined, as the ruins of the chapel beckoned with temptations both mortal and spectral. All they sought remained tantalizingly close, bound by the legacy's lustrous darkness that would finally lead them to the heart of their family's sins, challenging their courage in a land stewing with unresolved mysteries and betrayal. Chapter 12. The Price of Truth. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows upon the damp stone walls of the attic, illuminating the harrowing expressions etched across the faces of those gathered within. George's trembling form now seemed diminished, as if the weight of his betrayal bore down upon him more heavily than the encroaching darkness. The cloaked figure had become a haunting specter, their revelation reverberating through the minds of Edward, Clara, and Watson like a sinister echo in the confined space. Just as the atmosphere thickened with dread, a sudden crash resounded from the depths of the mansion, followed by a low, guttural groan, a sound too human to be discarded as merely the result of age. "Did you hear that?" Clara gasped, her hand instinctively moving to clutch Edward's arm. It came from below. Holmes's keen senses ignited with newfound determination, and he shot a penetrating glance at Edward, whose pallor deepened. This could be a diversion, a tactic to draw us away from the truth, he posited, his mind rapidly below the surface of the unfolding chaos. But it could also be a manifestation of the unrest that lingers within this accursed estate. Either way, it demands immediate investigation. Without hesitating, Holmes moved to take the lead, the others trailing closely behind him as he guided them down the narrow staircase. Each creak of the aged wood underneath their feet seemed to speak of long-buried secrets, finally rising to the surface. The air grew colder the further they descended, a palpable tension enveloping them like a shroud of mist cutting through a foggy London night. "There is something more here than we see," Holmes muttered under his breath as they approached the entrance to the grand hall, every fiber of his being alert to the potential dangers lurking just out of sight. The very foundation of this family's legacy twists with betrayal. We must remain vigilant. Clara nodded, though. Concern lingered in her eyes. What if we have misjudged George? He is a pawn in a larger game, my dear, Holmes said, cutting across her thought with an edge of frustration. You must not lose sight of the threats that loom above us. nor the desperate heart that might still beat beneath George's treachery. We've yet to unearth the web that binds this family's fate. As they stepped into the grand hall, the remnants of elegance flickered dimly amidst the decay. Dust motes danced in the waning light, and a musty smell of damp wood mingled with the faint aroma of fear suspended in the air. They gathered their composure, prepared to confront whatever unveiled itself, when Edward positioned himself in front of them, his breath hitching with urgency. "The will you mentioned, does it hold secrets useful to our quest?" he asked, his brows knitted tightly together. "Perhaps," Holmes replied, the words carrying the weight of hesitation. "But we must be prepared for violent truths, ones that may prove fatal." Before Edward could respond, another thud rippled through the house. The group exchanged anxious glances, the realization dawning that the time for lurking suspicion was over. They crossed the threshold leading toward the chapel, each step resonating with an ominous rhythm. "Holmes," George whispered suddenly as they pressed forward, "Lady Eleanor must be involved. She has known—" "Enough," Clara interjected. "What does it matter if she's part of this twisted legacy? We must act, but we cannot fall prey to paranoia." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "The very essence of lies can cloud even the brightest truths, Clara. We cannot discern the real from the fabricated without lucidity, nor can we grasp the threads that bind this entire family." His eyes narrowed as he observed some disturbed dust beneath a faded tapestry on the wall. "But this leads us somewhere. A disturbance reveals more than mere passage. It hints at concealment." He knelt to inspect the ground closer, running his fingers over the gritty surface. As he did so, an unmistakably distinct pattern formed beneath the dust. Faded initials interwoven into the fabric of the tapestry's border. "What do you see, Mr. Holmes?" Edward asked, moving closer. Holmes's finger traced the initials, his brow furrowing deeper. "E.B. Eleanor Bellingham. This is no mere object. It indicates whose hand it was that designed this symbolism." He rose slowly, his expression electrified with newfound understanding. "This represents more than legacy. It signifies possession. Whoever holds dominion over the chapel also commands the truths buried within." "But how could a will be shielded so?" George asked, the implication of Holmes' deduction dawning painfully upon him. Holmes's eyes darted to the doorway that led further into the creeping shadows of the chapel, marking an unsettling line of transition. A sanctuary can conceal more than mere ink. The heart of the matter lies at the intersection of loyalty and betrayal. Forthwith, let us pursue that which remains hidden. As they ventured inside, they were met by a vast, dimly lit space, adorned with crumbling altars and forgotten memories. Every corner crammed with dust-laden relics, whispering long-lost prayers. But it was a peculiar glint amidst the rubble that caught Holmes' unwavering attention. He moved swiftly, kneeling to examine what had been partially obscured, the jagged remains of a shattered chalice. Its handle bore an inscription, barely readable yet etched with a sense of looming significance. With trembling fingers, he brushed away debris and looked at it more closely. "My, what a telling find indeed," he said, his voice steady but resonating with excitement. "It carries the arms of House Bellingham, but there's more. A symbol that hints at treachery beyond mere family quarrels. This chalice is drenched in history. It speaks of allegiance stained with much more than mere ambition." A sudden heartbeat echoed through the chapel, causing them all to freeze. Another figure stepped from the shadows, a woman garbed in flowing robes adorned in the same symbols as the chalice. "You should not have come here," she warned, voice soft yet laced with authority. "This truth demands a price." Holmes stood firm, undeterred by her presence. "And we are prepared to pay it, but first require we know what lies behind these doors." In that instant, the candlelight flickered violently as shadows coalesced into a deeper darkness, unfurling menacingly across the chamber. The price of truth seethed in the air, bursting forth as an unfinished symphony, compelling them closer yet. And so they stood poised at the precipice of revelation, surrounded by echoes of a family's sins, interwoven with the fate of their own legacies. A darkness drawing back the veil and whispering secrets that would forever alter their destinies. The room swelled with anticipation, their hearts resonating with the tantalizing mystery, every whisper, promising that chaos awaited just beyond the black veil separating their desires from the grim price of truth.